to thank first Brian Vivian for inviting me here, second the group for having me here, and third, great, bear with me, this is going to be fun, methinks, and hopefully you can see it. Take time to move up closer if you need to. Okay, so there we go. Okay, here's the first shameless plug, well, the only shameless plug. This is my newest book, written with David Kaiser, no relation, doesn't know how to spell the name correctly. And this is all about biographic art, which you're going to see tonight. Tonight's talk is all about biographic art, which the Indians did to brag about their war exploits. This is the Bible of how to read biographic art, and we just finished it 2 years ago, and it's published by Verdigris Press in New York. Get a second mortgage on your house because the damn book costs $200 American dollars. Yikes. But the electronic version is less expensive. So there's the shameless plug. Okay. One has to assume that there's one person in the audience that doesn't know exactly where Writing-on-Stone is. Obviously, we all know that it's on the Milk River, just north of the Montana border, just north of the Sweetgrass Hills, UNESCO World Heritage Site, designated such in 2018. Lots of people don't understand that in addition to the main part of the Writing-on-Stone Park, there's the Hafner Coulee unit, which is upstream, about 7, 8, 9 kilometers upstream. And right across from Hafner Coulee is a whole bunch of crown land that we call, in the old days, Verdigris Coulee, which is the big glacial meltwater channel coming down there. And unfortunately, that crown land is all leased, so it's not part of the park. And the landowner thinks that the government is going to steal his land if he lets it be part of the World Heritage nomination, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that the most interesting rock art in that upstream part of the park is there at Verdigris Coulee. DGOW 32 is one of those sites. So there's a long history of research at Writing-on-Stone and specifically at DGOW 32, which you're looking at here. There's the site itself on that face, which you can see is directly above the Milk River. This is us, this is our crew, Bob Dawe, myself, a fellow named Tom McCormick, and Mark Willis, who was the drone pilot. This is a drone shot. If you look here, that white stuff is ice in the Milk River. This was October of 2019 when we showed up in Cutbank, Montana to do the job in Cutbank, 2 days before we came to Writing-on-Stone. It was 3 degrees below zero and there was 6 inches of snow on the ground in Cutbank. When we got to Writing-on-Stone, fortunately, the park itself was in a snow shadow of the Sweetgrass Hills. So you can see there's no snow on the ground, but it was cold, frozen, and perfect weather to drive out on the road to the Hafner Coulee unit and then walk down the cliffs, walk down the hills to the bottom and do our drone work, which is on this far side of the river, the north side of the Milk River. So there's a long history of research at this particular site. Selwyn Dewdney first studied Writing-on-Stone and this site in 1962. And he was there in 62 and 64, I believe. But in 60, both years, he looked at DGOW 32. As you can see right here, there's no way you can approach the site. The Milk River has undercut the whole thing, okay? This is Dewdney at the main site at DGOW2 at the main part of the park. But when Dewdney got there, this is the best parts of DGOW 32. When Dewdney got there, you could actually go out on some talus down here below the cliffs, and you could get out here, and he constructed a scaffold and put it up to where he could reach up to this part of the site. And then what he said was, he was there with a fellow named Alva Bear, who was a local guy down on the Milk River and who helped him find sites and look at stuff. And he said that Alva Bear, just a few years previous, had been able to walk out on the floodplain of the river right to the base of that site, right to where the Indians had stood to make the rock art. And you can see that over here. This is another site. This is DGOW 30, 1 here, okay? And you can see where the floodplain lays in there, and the rock art's all in there. Well, if you extrapolate that to here, you see that this is where the rock art is, okay? And in fact, you see this white area right here. That's the area that was covered by sediment in 1962, 1960, when Albert went out there, which has been since removed, okay? So, Dewdney really started this formal work at Writing-on-Stone in 1962. I came along in 1976 and did a lot of work at Writing-on-Stone, spent a full summer there working for Alberta Parks. This is not 1976. I was a lot skinnier in 1976. But in 1976, we recorded the sites in the main park unit. Then we came up here to Verdigris and recorded the 5 sites on the north side of the river. Nobody had recorded any sites on the south side of the river, any rock art sites at that time. When Michael Klassen came later, he found a whole bunch of sites on the south side. But when we came here to DGOW 32 in 1976, we could get out to here on that same kind of loose soil and stuff falling off the cliff, and put a ladder up in the Milk River to the last panel, the last locus, which is right here. So that's all that we could reach in 1976. In 2010, we came back with Jack Brink, and we were able to look at this part of the site by wading out in the river and using binoculars and photographs to photograph a piece of that to get a specific motif we were looking for. So the site was seen by me in '76 and 2010. Michael Klassen was there in 1993. So if you think about it, 62, 76, 93, about every 15 years, Alberta Parks sent somebody down there to check on the rock art, to look at it, to record it, to look at what the previous people had done. And as Marty, I think, said, or Michael Turney said, I consider that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Well, that's exactly what you do here. If Dewdney hadn't started that work at Writing-on-Stone, I would have been lost in the woods. So I had all his stuff that I could look at and say, no, improve on this, do this, check this, accept that, you know. If Michael Klassen then used my stuff to do the same thing, annotated all my tracings, and now we're going back, Turney and Landon Bendiak are going back in the early 2000s and doing the same sorts of things by looking at what I did, what Dewdney did, and what Michael did. So that's the way rock art studies kind of grow, sort of, you know, by accretion like that. But here's how Michael looked at the site. By the time Michael got there, you couldn't even access this part of the site from the ground. You had to actually put your ladder up in the Milk River. You had to wade out in the river and put a ladder up. So Michael, to get to these parts, you can see that this is down low enough where the white is. This is down low enough so a ladder will reach it. This is not, okay? Can't get a ladder big enough. So Michael and his assistant rappelled down from the top to look at what we consider to be the main focus of DGOW 32, which is the battle scene and another scene, which is a warfare scene. And you'll get to see all those in a minute. The point I'm making here is that that's pretty tough archaeology. That's way beyond my limited skill set. I could not have done that. Thankfully, Michael did. He shared a lot of those photographs that he took with me, and I have used them many, many times with his permission. And now we have even better stuff. So that's sort of the history there. Every 15 years or so, this site has been looked at. Now, I don't know if Parks has any plans to go up to Verdigris and look at these sites in addition, like Michael Turney and Bendiak are looking at down in the main part of the park. But certainly there should be somebody looking at the sites up there in the same sense. Okay, this work, all of that work that I just described, produced an extensive history of recordings and publications. There's Selwyn Dewdney's. The only article he really published about this was a little short 7-page thing in the Beaver, which you Canadians may know that. Anybody in America doesn't know anything about the Beaver, but fortunately I was given a Xerox of it by by the Glenbow guy, Hugh Dempsey gave me, he said, here, Dewdney wrote something about that. He handed me a Xerox of that, so fortunately I had that. So that was Dewdney's contribution. And what he did, and what I also got from Hugh Dempsey at the Glenbow when I was here, my only other visit to Calgary, 1976, was Dewdney's original, not his original, but copies of his original tracings, which are not, in fact, tracings, as you will see. These are, what Dewdney did, he used rice paper, which he wet and put on the rock, and then he traced sort of the stuff with Conte chalk on the wet rice paper, and then he stood back and Dewdney was an artist, for those of you who don't know, and an accomplished rock art recorder from back east around the Great Lakes. And he then sketched in the parts that he thought should be there and left out some parts he didn't thought shouldn't be there. And so it's an incredible mishmash of imagery, and you'll see why in a minute. But this is valuable stuff because for many, many, many years, this was the only record we had of the key site in Plains archaeology to show the first meeting of the horse and the shield, okay? The big shield guys and the guys on horses with little shields. These are the first guys who had horses, and all their horses wore these big leather armor coats and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's amazing. And we had this one sketch that Dewdney did. And again, you'll see more of that here in a minute. Here's Dewdney's recording of the second combat scene, and I'll save the best stuff on this one for a moment. Oh, here it is. So Dewdney writes, here was a pointed shoulder man. We call these V-neck warriors now. Here's a pointed shoulder man perched on a boat-shaped beast. The only possible interpretation was man on horse. It was obviously the natives' first reaction to the coming of the horse. I stared with delight at the carvings. For here was a priceless record of two major events in the history of the Plains Indians: the appearance of the mounted warrior and the arrival of firearms. And you can see that right here, okay? Here's your guy on your horse. That's a horse, believe it or not. And here's the gun, okay? And Dewdney had this, he didn't really try to explain this. He said, here's guys with a gun and guy on a horse, okay? So that's what we had from Dewdney. And dozens and dozens and dozens more of these drawings from clear down in the main unit of the park all the way up here to, Verdigris Coulee. And thank God we have them, because in the interim, between the time Dewdney worked at Verdigris and the time I came to Verdigris, someone had gone down to Verdigris Coulee and used a saw and cut off several big panels. And some of them are gone. Some of them were found in Lethbridge by somebody who picked them up after they'd fallen off the cliff, and et cetera, et cetera. And some probably did fall off the cliff because they're pieces. And when the guy sawed it off, it broke into pieces. And so God knows if he or she got anything. But the point is, Dewdney was able to sketch those. So we have this sort of Dewdney-esque record of the pieces that are missing. So thankfully, because I've used some of those in some other work I've done. Here's Old You Know Who, and in '77, I wrote a big thick report to parks, Alberta parks, and then I summarized that report in the Canadian Journal of Archaeology, talking about the rock art at Writing-on-Stone. And there is my tracing, a copy of my original tracing of the panel at your far right end of that site. So Dewdney's tracing, Dewdney's sketching, tracing. Oops, well, anyway, remember the site. Dewdney's part is right here. This part here is down off of this part. So there's what I did. Now my tracings were on a plastic we called visqueen at the time. You used to put in your garden and make little greenhouses for your plants when it was cold out with it. It was kind of milky white and it was difficult to see through, and we had the equivalent of Sharpie pens in those days. Well, it's no wonder that I missed about 30% of what's there, because you couldn't see through this stuff very well. So there's a lot of stuff missing from my original tracings, which Michael Klassen very effectively pointed out and very nicely pointed out, this is missing, this belongs in here. So we've gone back to do some of this stuff with some much better plastic nowadays, and we can get lots more detail. Anyway, so there's that, and in 2010, this publication in 2012 is the result of that 2010 project, we were looking specifically at this thing right here. See, if you look, here's that horse right here, and you don't see his rein, and you don't see this little trident thing there. That little trident thing right here, okay? Oh, there's no projector. This little trident thing, so you can do that with your projector. This little trident thing is what's called a capture hand. And that's the way the Blackfoot drew a hand to say, I stole this horse. So that little trident says, the whole message is, I stole this horse from an enemy, okay? And so we had missed that in the original drawing. As you can see, it's not there. And I thought I had seen it in one of the pictures I took, but I didn't have enough definition. And I asked Michael Klassen, do you have a picture of this? And he had a picture, and we both thought we saw it in the picture, but there wasn't quite enough definition. So that's when we went and waded out in the middle of the Milk River and took pictures and looked with a pair of binoculars, and we saw that, and we got a really good picture of it. That was the first one of those found in rock art, okay? The first one of those documented in rock art. They're all through Blackfoot robe art. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of them in Blackfoot robe art. So that's my contribution to the early literature of that. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry. And here's Michael Klassen. Now, Michael didn't do a lot of publications. He did a thesis and an article he abstracted from that thesis about writing on stone in general, but his publications didn't spend a lot of time at Verdigris Coulee. And again, his thesis was, kind of theoretical and was more, developed more about talking about the evolution of this art, rather than here's the art, here's the site, here's more sites, here's more art, blah, blah, blah. But what Michael did was he got these great photographs, as you can see. And he shared those with me, and he's very good at that, and I'm very grateful that he did. And so what we see here is some incredible things. There's that scene with the horse with the armor coat on it, big leather armor coat. Well, if you start looking, you see, oh, there's a line, there's a circle, there's a hand. When you trace that out, you see that there's a V-neck man underneath that horse. So you got a V-neck warrior, and he's throwing a spear underneath that horse. The horse is superimposed on that V-neck figure. And we could see that from Michael's photographs, but we couldn't see it well enough throughout all of the whole area of the site to do much with it. We had this indication that there was a deeper layer, if you will, of rock art on that site, but we couldn't tell mostly what it was, what it consisted of. So that was one of the things that made us want to go back. And here's the work that Michael did. There's his, his MA thesis in this archaeology of rock art. He did that article, which is abstracted there. And finally, Michael and I did the book on Northern Plains rock art, thanks to Jack Brink, who called me up one day and said, Kaiser, you gotta come to visit Writing-on-Stone. You gotta talk to this guy, Michael Klassen. You two, there's a book. Between the two of you, there's a book in this. And lo and behold, there was after some 8 years, because Michael had to do his MA in between. So basically, that's the history of research and publications there at this site. So clearly, much attention paid to the Writing-on-Stone and the site was recognized as a key site early on. I mean, Dewdney recognized it in his own way when he said, here's the first record of the meeting of horses and guns on the Northern Plains. I mean, that's prescient for somebody who was an artist from Ontario who knew nothing about Plains archaeology. He picked right up on the fact that that's a really important site. But the problem for our current research, of course, was the site was essentially out of reach since 1960. All we had was these bits and bobs. We had these Dewdney-esque recordings, which as you'll see in a minute, are filled full of problems. And we had Michael Klassen's pictures when he rappelled down, and you rappel down, you know, you're this far from the rock art, so you kind of got to brace yourself and hold your camera way back here and take a picture of it and hope for the best. And so some of the stuff he got's really good. Some of it's really terrible. Well, he sent me one picture and we got this great boat form horse like you were looking at on those other pictures. No idea where it is on the site because he's taking it like this and there's no landmark in it. So, you know, Michael said, well, I don't remember where it was. It's in between this and this, you know, some place from me to Brian. Okay, well, come on. That's not exactly what we call fine-tuning our locational data here. So basically, we had this record that was pretty sketchy throughout the whole time. Now, here's that quote from Dewdney, and I think it bears repeating. He said in 1962, now, Dewdney, not only were his sketches sketchy, his writing is equally sketchy because he has two versions of this quote, and they each quote different years. So I think Dewdney played fast and loose with his notes in addition to his sketches, but this is the one I like best. He said, Alva Bear testified that only a few years ago, it was quite easy to reach this site being where the battle scene is. Now, however, both River Flat and talus have been eroded, and the only access is along the river's edge. Even so, the lowest carvings are still a dozen feet above the closest we could climb to it on a peak of debris piled beneath. He and Alva Bear and Don King actually built scaffolding in the river for him to get up fairly close to this. And interestingly, he got close to some other stuff, and just, oh, okay, there's a horse up there, and he sketched a horse. You'll see what he missed. Oops, oops, oops. Get out of there. So, all we had is for this record then, is Dewdney's 62 sketches, my incomplete tracing of a part of one panel, of one locus, and a reconstruction of another. We used Michael Klassen's pictures the best we could on that upper end, and we reconstructed the best we could the layers of rock art in there. And we saw at least 3 layers as we reconstructed it. So essentially that's what we had. That's what we had. And so I was at the Plains conference with Bob Dawe in 2018. And I had talked to Jack about this. And Jack was one of my best friends in this business, but sometimes Jack's underwear could be awfully tight. And he said to me, well, I don't know. You know, there's raptors on that cliff, and we wouldn't want anybody flying the drone into the cliff and harming the rock art and blah, blah, blah. So I let it drop, and I talked to Bob Dawe at the Plains conference in 2018. And I think one of the reasons is Dawe had, when I talked to Jack about it 2 years earlier, Dawe had just crashed a drone, right? He just sent a drone and it flew off somewhere and crashed in a farmer's field. I think that's what Jack was reacting to. But when I talked to Bob at the Plains conference, I said, Bob, this really needs to be done. This really, really needs to be done. That site is a key site. Everybody cites the site. Everybody knows it's important. Everybody publishes these pictures of drawings that are half-baked. And they're the best we can do, but they're just not done, they're just not really good. And I have the world's best drone pilot. And Dawe says, no, we have the world's best drone pilot in Alberta. Of course you do, I said. But I have one who will come to Alberta and do this work for nothing. So anyway, we agreed essentially that drone technology had progressed to the point that we could do this work. And if we did it in the fall, late fall, it wouldn't bother the raptors, no nesting, et cetera, and we could do it without damaging the rock art. So, in 2019, we met Bob at Writing-on-Stone, and we did the project, and there you're back to that same picture I showed earlier. That's us. It's cold out. And we're looking at rock art, and so we didn't care that it was cold. And Mark Willis, who's from Texas, doesn't know anything about Northern Plains rock art, and said, wow, look at this stuff, wow, look at this stuff. He's looking in the monitor, and I'm going, Jesus, I want to see this. He said, you can't, I got to look at the monitor, keep the drone from getting the pictures. And, wow, look at this, wow, look at this. I'm going, "Gee whiz, let me at it." So anyway, we finally got it all sorted out. He took hundreds and hundreds of pictures, and he took them back to Texas, and he did this sort of stuff. This is the tech stuff for any of you who are tech weenies in the audience. This is the panel 1 of Locus 3, okay? And this, I have mapped out the drone flight that he flew across there, okay? So that's the drone flight for panel 1. He flew that, taking dozens and dozens and dozens of pictures on that flight. He then stitches those together and gives me a picture of the whole panel. And then I look at each of those pictures and I compare them to the pictures of the panel as a whole, et cetera, and we do tracing. So 300 digital photographs and 30 or so from 30 centimeters to a meter distance from the cliff. So, you know, you're talking from this far from the cliff to this far from the cliff. I mean, as close as you could get with your eyeballs. The problem, of course, is we had one day, we had 2 hours of that day, and we couldn't, the sun was out, as you can see, a nice day for photographing, but we didn't get any sun movement during that 2 hours, or not enough to make a difference. If we could have had 4 or 5 days there for 4 or 5 hours a day, we'd got the sun moving across that surface, and you see a lot more because the sun grazing light shows you different things from different angles on petroglyphs. There are no pictographs at this site. Well, 4 or 5 days at the site, and 4 or 5 hours a day would have been great if I had, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. What I had was a small little research grant to drive from Portland, Oregon to Writing-on-Stone and do this. So we did the best with what we did, with what we had. And I think we did a really good job, but it could be better. There's more stuff to do down there. So that's all the tech weenie stuff. I don't even know what it means. Oops, something's coming up here. There, that's all the tech weenie stuff. Quadcopter drone, 12 megapixel camera. I'm interested in rock art next. But this essentially, we were able to relocate all the 3 loci recorded, noted by Dewdney, myself, and Michael Klassen. Dewdney called them panels. He also called this site 128 or something. He didn't have the Borden system of numbering. He didn't have any reasonable numbering system. It was just the Dewdney system, site 124 or 122 or whatever it was. Meaningless to any archaeologist nowadays. When Michael Klassen, when I got there, I called them panels because I wasn't very smart then about how rock art was structured. Rock art, this is a panel here, okay? This is bounded by the rock shape, and this is a panel of rock art. Here's another panel of rock art. This is a locus where panels exist, okay? But because we had these already listed in the literature as panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, we had to kind of stay with that ordering. We didn't want to turn that on its head, you know, and have our number 1 be at one end of the site and Dewdney's number 1 be at another end of this. That would really be confusing. Changing it from panel to locus was confusing enough. But we kind of had to do that in order to get this stuff all in order, in the right pigeonhole. And then we did panels within each locus. Okay, and the panels are numbered. This is panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, panel 4. I think you'll see that in the next slide. But that's just a bookkeeping thing, a housekeeping thing. So, that's that entire locus of locus 1. And no, that's the 2, and that's panels 3 and 4. Panels 1 and 2 that you just saw over here. So there's the flight lines that he did, and these are flight areas where he focused in on. There's some really neat figures there, so he took a whole bunch of pictures. So you can see this is what we had to do the first, again, for the tech people in the audience. This is the kind of stuff we had to do to be able to, well, when we found something on slide X, you know, photograph X, we wanted to know exactly where it was in the site. Not like Michael Klassen's picture taken over his head like this, right? So there. That's locus 1, panels 1, 2, 3, 4, as you go from right to left. Loci go from left to right, because that's a historical thing, but panels always go from right to left. Okay, so there you can see the structure of this, and you get an idea of how we had to structure this to. So what did we find? What's the rock art? Come on. Locus 1 is the key locus on the site. It's been isolated the longest, has the most key scenes, blah, blah, blah. Neat stuff. So what did we find? Somebody in the audience is going, God, he's finally going to get to the rock art. Thank heavens. Okay, to quote Howard Carter, we found wonderful things. We really did. The first thing we did was we verified our reconstruction and verified and modified our reconstruction from 2015 using Michael Klassen's photographs of the battle scene panel. And you all remember, well, unfortunately it's going off here a little bit. You all remember this guy with the V-neck warrior underneath him. You look, here's the battle scene. Well, I'll show you.
Library. We will be closing in 15 minutes. Please take your material to the checkout stations on the main floor.
You wish. So there's the earliest episode of rock art on that panel. You get these
Thank
big.
you for using the Central Library. We will be closing in 15 minutes. Please take your material to the checkout stations on the main floor.
You get these big V-neck guys. You get some shield-bearing warriors. Everybody knows what a shield-bearing warrior is. The guy right in the upper center there. There's a partial one just to the right of him, and that one to the right is interesting. And so that's the first episode of rock art on that panel, by all indications from Michael Klassen's photographs and from our drone photographs. That's the second episode on that panel. That's the battle scene that we all talk about. When you talk about the Verdigris Coulee battle scene, that's the one you're looking at. Sans this guy, okay? This is the battle scene. You can see that this is the same kind of boat form horse, banana-shaped horse, big tail, big mane, blah, 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 all that stuff. But it's carved by a different artist at a slightly different time. You can see he didn't use the same surface. This surface is not as good a surface. And the horse is smaller and just shaped differently. But it's the same art tradition. So this guy comes after these guys draw this beautiful picture here. And he adds his own horse to it, which happens a lot in biographic art. A lot of times you scent mark the site by putting your own drawing on it, okay? You claim it for yourself. So there's the second, that's the battle scene. So there's the first two episodes, as if you went to that site in, say, AD 1710. That's what you would have seen.
We will be closing in 15 minutes. Please take your material to the checkout stations on the main floor.
Okay. That's what you would have seen about AD 1710, if you'd gone to that site. Now, that's interesting. There's what happened in the next 180 years. So you get all this later stuff. More horses with more modeled bodies, mature style horses, little guys here, hourglass body stuck guys. Here, guys in forts, killed guys. Here's 4 killed guys. Here's guys in forts with the weapons all looking in at them. Horses. Here's a guy with a shield and a bow and arrow shooting this guy on a horse. Lots and lots and lots of stuff. Oh, and that palimpsest of stuff is really difficult to sort out what the stratigraphy there is, because these are all scratched. The others are incised, and you can pretty well tell with incisions which is earlier and which is newer, which is earlier and which is later. With scratches, it's very, very difficult and almost impossible from a meter away. You need a hand lens and to have your eye right up like this. So until somebody gets up there on scaffolding and looks at that palimpsest just is 150 years or so of rock art at this site. Okay, but here's some of the additions that happened that from when we had Mike Klassen's pictures. we're able to place this new guy there in his position. That's the one we had the picture of. We had no idea where it was. There he is. You've seen him a moment ago. We're able to show that these rub-outs in this fortification, they're in red here. They're not red on the site, but I used them in red here. These are called rub-outs. The Blackfeet did this a lot. A dead person, you just put a slash on. Okay? So these are 4 dead guys in a fort. These are 4 dead enemies in a fort. You tell that by putting the slash through them. Well, we couldn't tell that from Michael Klassen's pictures. We can from the drone pictures. Okay, so there's 2 things. There's others in that palimpsest of drawings that were new, but those are the 2 key important ones. And honestly, that would have been enough. If that had been the whole drone project at 32, that would have justified coming there with the drone and doing that research. That would have been enough. But that's far and away not what we got. We found so much more stuff. On panel 2 of Locus 1, it's located, we found this horse and rider. And that's a wine glass style, hourglass body style guy. Triangular body, wine glass style. Here, 1 leg, foot. A beautiful horse. That's amazing drawing. The guy, the Blackfoot artist who drew that was truly a master artist. There's a tracing of that. And I really do think this is where, remember I said we couldn't have the sun at different angles. I really do think there's probably buttonhook hooves on the front legs of that horse too. But try as we might, 20 pictures of that damn thing, we couldn't tell that there were buttonhook hooves on it, but we can see them on the back very clearly. And I think it's just the angle of the sun. You can see the angle of the sun is coming in on this picture, right like this. And see, I think that's a buttonhook hoof there. I think that's one too. But we don't put them in. Unlike Dewdney, we don't put them in unless we can see them. So, something for the next guy who climbs up there or does another drone and spends 2 or 3 days at the site. We got a half a dozen other horses, including on panel 2, including these 2 real odd ones. And these are major interesting. This first one, I looked at that and I thought, well, we have skunks at other sites that look just like them, literally, tails up over their back like that. But skunks don't have reins on them. So that's an early boat form horse, the weirdest one on the plains. And look at this guy. If you saw that at any other, if you saw that at the main site of Writing-on-Stone, you would guarantee, I guarantee, Marty Magny would say, oh, it's drawn by somebody from the rodeo grounds. Literally, I would have said that. Well, we know it's not here because there's not one graffito on that site. Nobody graffitied that site ever before it was out of reach. That's a drawing by an Indian of a horse, or another critter, but I think it's a horse because it's long and it's got a straight neck and a head pointing forward like Blackfeet horses do. Is that a kid's drawing of a horse? We don't know, but it's nice because this site lets us see essentially a pristine surface. A pristine surface that we go, all the stuff on there is drawn by Indians. It's not drawn by cowboys or rodeo people or tourists or somebody, else. We know that's drawn by Indians. So, very good.
Thank you for using the Central Library.
Panel 3.
We'll be closing in 10 minutes. Please take your materials to the checkout stations on the main floor.
If we didn't get it the first 7 times, I'll bet the last 3 aren't going to help us much. Okay, so panel 3 of that same locus. Here's, you remember this scene, you're going to see it ad nauseum here for a moment, but there's that scene where Dewdney said this is the first meeting of the horse and the gun. Well, here's the history of that. This is Dewdney's recording in '62. This is Dewdney's published sketch. What do you notice that's different between his published sketch and his drawing? First of all, he left the arm off this guy, right? This is why you can't rely on Dewdney's records. And there's other slight differences in here. Here's Kaiser's published drawing in 77 using the 62 field recording, okay? And mind you, in those days, we didn't have this good Xerox where you just slap something on there, Xerox it, and boom, scan it, and you've got your drawing. You had to use a rapidograph pen and make your drawings on a light table, so even you missed some stuff then, and there's some slight differences if you look between this and this. Here's the drawing we got from the 2020 project, from the 2019 project. Look at the differences. Look, here's this guy's arm and this, but look, the gun, this guy's actually taking the gun, he's grabbing the end of the gun, he's got 5 fingers. This guy's got a big long arm that reaches up and touches the gun, this guy's arm reaches over and touches this guy, blah, blah, blah. Lots more stuff, lots more detail. So what's that all mean? There's the drawing made from that, a number of those pictures you just saw. There's the photo tracing, that's what we call these, the photo tracing of that image. So let's take a look at this. When you break that down based on the way that's drawn, you see that this is the first episode. And again, we've put the fingers in that Dewdney didn't get and all that. So what we have here is a one-armed guy, not uncommon, and a guy on a horse, and this guy, instead of this guy shooting this guy, which is what everybody thought, right? This guy is taking the gun away from the pedestrian. He's grabbed the end of it, he's taken it away from the pedestrian. So the artist just changed from this guy drawing the drawing to this guy drawing the drawing, okay? This guy, this is his coup that he counted. And he's also got another hand and arm here. He said, I rode up to this guy on the ground who had a gun, and I grabbed it away from him. That's how that reads, okay? Well, the next guy comes, some years later, but not very many years later. He sees that drawing here, and he says, well, remember, what I said is, these artists scent marked a scene like this. They drew their own drawing as part of it to say, this is really my war honor. So this guy draws himself in like this, see? And he draws another weapon on this guy's hand, on this guy's new arm. He draws a new arm with another weapon. And the reason we know that is the depth of line and the way the lines are made and blah, blah, blah. We really do know that stuff. And so here's what it says. I took a gun from a person, and I touched a person who had a bow spear. So see, Dewdney had it. These two guys with the gun attacked this guy. Totally wrong. This guy took the gun from this guy. This guy came along later and said, no, I took a gun and I touched a guy who had a bow spear. So, in addition to fixing up scenes like that last one, getting it so we can really understand them, we recorded battle scenes that had never before been documented. You can see some stuff here. Interestingly, Dewdney recorded one of the horses here. And some of you are looking confusedly at this picture going, what? Where's the horse? Who's on first here? No, he's on second. There's the photo tracing of that. That is one of the coolest battle scenes at the whole of Writing-on-Stone. And it was right outside. Dewdney sketched this horse. He was close enough to see this horse, so he could clearly have seen this guy and that guy and the other guys. He just sketched that horse. He sketched a little horse. Said, this is another horse on the side.
Central Library.
Yeah, well, absolutely, it's another horse on the side. But like I say, this takes its place as one of the top 3 or 4 battle scenes at the entire Writing-on-Stone mega site. And there's some really interesting stuff in here. You can look at some of the stuff and see this gun here? It floats out of that guy's hand. It's out here in space. That means this gun is this gun taken by this guy who has this big shield, big war bonnet, okay? See this guy running around out here? He's one of our guys being the winners here. He's one of our guys running around on the field of battle, collecting a horse and touching this horse with a stick, or a coup stick or something. But watch this. This is what's really cool on this site. If you think I like this stuff and I'm excited about it, you're right. See the red arrows? We don't really know. Is this a volley of 5 arrows? I don't think so. I think it's actually 2 arrows. The first one missed. And here's the second one actually flying away from his bow and hitting the horse. Because this happens with guns all the time. When they show a gun shooting, there's dot, 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 splat. Okay? He didn't shoot 27 bullets. That just shows the path of the bullet. I think this shows the path of the arrow going over to shoot that horse. Now it's possible that he shot 5 arrows. Certainly possible. But this is the only, we have some scenes in ledger art, drawings on paper, in books that show similar stuff. But this is the only scene in rock art where we have this kind of path of an arrow in flight. This is a quiver, so this is the quiver he had. But anyway, that's a very cool thing. There's the horse that Dewdney drew. Didn't draw the rider. So you can see by the sketch that it's the same horse. It's the only horse in that entire site that's got this kind of structure here and here. But, you know, I mean, didn't draw the rider, didn't draw his gun, didn't draw anything. So that's why you have to be careful with Dewdney's stuff. And you know, gee whiz, I'm not being critical there, because you have to be careful with my stuff too. If you use my stuff, and I once told Jack, I said, it's amazing. I go back and look at these sites and how much I missed. Well, of course, that's the way this science progresses. Okay, we recorded a second capture hand at this site. There's only 2 at Writing-on-Stone. They're both at this site. There you see the scene as in ambient light. There's the photo tracing of it. This is our hero. There's his gun. He actually reaches out with his gun, touches the bow of this guy, and there's his hand taking the bow away. Now we looked, and we looked, and we looked again and again and again for the foot tracks. We should lead right up here. There should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 little footprints leading up there. Best we can tell, there's not. And either they're not there, or they're just put in the right way that the sun didn't pick them out. Somebody's got to go check that someday. But you can clearly tell what's going on. That capture hand, there's the other one at the other end of the site. These are opposite ends of that site. We documented another example of what's called the trampling coup. This is one of my favorite coups. This is when a warrior, war honors were scored on a point system, sort of. So you got the most points for taking an enemy's gun, you got points for taking a horse, you got points for getting wounded, you got points for trampling an enemy. We call this the roadkill coup, right? This literally, you got points for making your horse ride right over the top of an enemy. Horses won't do that of their own accord. You have to train the horse to do that, okay? So when you trained a horse to do that, you painted this on its breast, or 2 hands on each shoulder, like that. Well, rock art's too small to see those kind of paintings. But fortunately, historic photos are not. We see lots of these in historic photos. Here's this hand. That's this hand right here. I think I've got a line connected. Okay? Now, I've seen probably 10 pictures of the trampling coup painted on a Blackfoot horse. By the way, this is a wound spot. This means the horse got wounded in a fight. You also got a point for that. But I've seen about 10 pictures of this, and every one of them, the photographer, this is Walter McClintock, every one of them took the picture from the side, like this. They want to see the horse. They want to see the fancy saddle blanket, and the guy, you know, and his shield and all this. Not one of them took the picture from the front, showing us the guy. It's painted on the front of the horse. But fortunately, we Montanans have our artist Charlie Russell, who was an expert at recording what the Indians did and painted on their horses. And we know this because we actually have examples where Charlie Russell, we have the picture of the horse painting, and we have Charlie Russell's picture painted years later that shows the exact same picture painted on the horse. So there's what that picture looks like. You see, leg going down the horse's leg, arm going up to the side. So we know what it looked like, fortunately. So in rock art, in rope art and rock art, they're too small to show the painting actually on the horse. So you showed the act. Well, here's a rope painting, Blackfoot rope painting from about 1880. And it couldn't be more clear here. Here's the guy, gun thrown back, falling down, horse track, right over the top, right? Very clear. In rock art, they're not quite that clear, but almost. There's one from Verdigris Coulee, just across the river from DGOW 32. There's one from DGOW 32. Same thing. So the horse usually flares up a little bit. The guy drops his weapon and falls backwards as the horse tramples right over the top of it. So we recorded another example of that too at the site. Horse raiding. This site, 32, when we recorded it, we wrote a whole article because we have these pristine surfaces we can use as sort of a Rosetta Stone for the rest of Writing-on-Stone. Because nobody has come up there and made scratches and crapped around with it and drawn other things, and Joe was here and, you know, blah, 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 and put lots of extra marks on there. So when you see a drawing like this, you know this is a picket rope, and you know that's the picket pin. That's not the start of Don, you know, or Jim or something, which you can't tell when you go to the main site at Writing-on-Stone, because it's covered by initials and scratches and crap from, you know, 50, 70, 80, 100 years of people messing with that site. But when you find it on a pristine surface, you can tell it's there because the Indian put it there in that particular relationship. So basically, we came out with this chart from DGOW 32. And these are all examples. This is at the main site of Writing-on-Stone. This is a really interesting one, and I'll talk about it in a minute. This is at 32, this is at 32. This is at 32, see the capture hand, see the same capture hand on Blackfoot rope art. This is at DGOW 27, see the whole thing going on here. This is across the river from the main site at Writing-on-Stone. This is at the main site. And this is when you interpose a human between the horse and the teepee. Here it's interposed with a knife, meaning even more, I cut the picket rope, but the picket rope's not shown. Well, in fact, then you get up here, you actually showed him cutting the picket rope. Well, that's at DGOV 75. We didn't, when I recorded that, we didn't see all that detail. Now we do, very clear. Here it's, you know, taking a horse from the front of an enemy teepee. Here's the cut picket rope, see? And here's the Blackfoot vocabulary for late, this is 1890s era, stolen horses. Well, lo and behold, site at Writing-on-Stone got exactly the same vocabulary. So we're able, with using DGOW, oh, and there's herds of horses. Okay, got those. We're able, using DGOW 32, to use it as a measuring stick for other sites at Writing-on-Stone and recognize other horse stealing scenes. Suddenly, some of those scratches and little odd markings become, oh, I get it, that's a picket pin in front of that horse. That's not just an odd mark. So here are the examples specifically from DGOW 32. You can see there's several of them there. This guy's one of my favorites here. There's no head on that horse. We know, we've got pictures of it from every angle. But lots of times early horses, boat-form horses like that, didn't have a head because they barely could draw the horse, let alone the head. And here the guy's stealing it from a village, right? Here's a horse riding away from a village. Here's a guy taking a horse from the front of a teepee or maybe a war lodge. Here's picket ropes, cut picket ropes. Here's herds. This one's really neat. This is another one of those claiming the scene for your own. Here's the first scene: teepee, picket pin, picket rope, shorthand horse. Right? Next guy comes up, sees the teepee and probably the picket pin, although you can't tell, puts his own horse right over the top of the shorthand horse to say, no, I stole a horse too. So you get, and again, none of this stuff was seen. Dewdney didn't see this, Michael Klassen didn't see it, I didn't see it, nobody saw it. There's the cut picket ropes. This is one that's really interesting. The Cheyenne and other Central to Southern Plains tribes had a special kind of horse capture. If the horse was running loose on the battlefield, if you touched it with your weapon or you grabbed its rein, you could claim that horse. The Blackfeet have no indication they believed that, no indication that they did that. But here's a picture of it at Writing-on-Stone at DGOW 32. So I suspect they did it too, if we just didn't get in the ethnography. So, this is locus 2 at the site, is the lesser known and of lesser importance. Michael saw 3 human figures when he rappelled down. There's one of them. There's a second one. And here's a third one. Well, there's what that locus looks like. Okay? All this stuff. All the way across to the guy we just talked about, taking a horse on the open field. And you can see there's some interesting stuff. This is probably another horse and rider. We just don't have enough definition. But look at all this. Michael saw this little guy. Well, behind it is this great big V-neck guy, which we don't understand at all. And then there's this guy taking the horse from in front of this teepee, a war lodge. And this guy's superimposed, so you can get an idea of some chronology there. This one's one of the neatest ones there. This dark is an early image. Now, whether that's a teepee originally or just an asterisk thing, which they made lots of those kind of odd carvings. The next guy that came and saw it about 1820 or 1830 said, oh, that's a teepee. So he carved a picket pin and he put a horse by it to say, I stole a horse from in front of this teepee. So, all those guys, these guys are really cool. That's probably part of an animal out there. We just couldn't see enough to know it. But these guys are really neat. And here's another one, picket pin horse, very tiny horse. Look at the size of it. So this was mostly traced. This is locus 1, mostly traced in 76. We added to it in 2010. There's a lot of this stuff. I've shown you all of this. We've talked about it. There's one interesting thing here. Oh, that's the capture hand. Look at here. From the drone photography, look at what shows up behind this horse. A great big guy with a bustle. And we can't see his head well enough to get it traced. But clearly that's older than the horses and riders. And how much older? We don't know. But somebody got to get up there and do a better job of tracing that. So here's the rest of the story of Locus 3, and it's really interesting. You just saw that part. There in the middle, right there, there's just a horse and a scrawl. But over here, on that far left side, look at that teepee village. And the guy stealing a horse from it. But if you break that down, if you look at it very carefully on these photographs, you get this sequence. So that the earliest images drawn here are this V-neck guy and some lines, probably another V-neck guy in here, we just can't tell. But clearly a V-neck guy here and some lines. The second episode is this guy stealing a horse from this big village here. And then, like half a dozen of the other sites, somebody else comes along and scratches 2 shorthand horses. See, I stole horses from in front of the teepee too. So, again, because this site is pristine, we can look at this chronology, we can look at this reuse of imagery, we can see that those really are shorthand horses. That's not just scrawls drawn by a cowboy, covered by somebody's initials. We can see exactly what's going on here. So, quickly, I'll go through this quickly. Tell me when I run out of time, okay? Raise your hand. Go like this. My wife always says, put your fingers in your ears like this. Loud. Okay. So, this shows some articles that I've written with a fellow named Stephen Lysette, who's an expert statistician. And we use something called principal coordinates analysis. And the picture comes out like this. These are the two coordinates, blah, blah, blah. I know nothing about this. What I know about statistics, you could write on my thumbnail with a big fat greased pencil and have room left for footnotes at the bottom, okay? So basically, these L1, P1, number 3, L3, 1, blah, blah, these locus 1, panel 1, image number 2, locus 1, panel 3, image number 1, okay? So these, all the things in gray are from the site, okay? Now, if you look at that, the thing about principal coordinates analysis is, when you arrange them on this, they make an arc. And that means you've got a good seriation. That means these are in order, okay? So these are, and then we put them against Blackfoot Road. So here's the 4-0 road, here's the Kane road, here's Catlin's road, the shirt that Paul Kane collected, the shirt that Hopkins collected, the Malcolm road, the road in Copenhagen, the Owl Road, the Red Cranes Road, drawn in 1892, the Marion Road, the Desmond Road, drawn in the 1890s, Crop-Eared Wolf's Road, drawn in 1893. So you can arrange the known age Blackfoot art and put your own art right on it and show where it fits in the sequence. So what we've got at that site, we've got this bunch here. These are L1, P1, C. So we know that this is pre-Robart. Here's the two earliest pieces of Blackfoot Robart, the Sweden shirt and the Ellis shirt. And we know it's earlier. See, it's earlier on that arc. Then you've got the battle scene in here, L1, P1, 2. And then you've got this where the gun meets the horse. So the nice thing about this is we knew these were old based on the structure of the arc and what the image shows. The earliest horses, big shields, which are pedestrian warfare before the horse first meets the horse. The horses have these big armored coats on. So we know that's very early. We know this is early. And this is underneath the early. Well, guess what's nice about this? They all fall at the earliest part of this seriation. So we have here some good proof that our seriation is working. Then you go on, here's the second bunch, L3, P1, L1, P3, 2, blah, blah, blah. So this bunch of stuff is over here in this period of 1830 to 1850. And this bunch of stuff here, the trampling coup, this guy shooting a guy on a horse in the 1850 to 1880 period. So we're beginning to get a handle on some chronology here from, which, I mean, good Lord, 25 years ago, 45 years ago, when I was at Writing-on-Stone, we had no idea this sort of chronology. 25 years ago, when Michael Klassen was there, no idea. This great stuff. I mean, seriously. We had no idea of this kind of chronological possibilities, and now we do. So, here's a chrono sequence from the Northern Plains. Lots of stuff. This is from Verdigris Coulee. This is from Kievan Rim. This is from Turner Rock Shelter. This is mostly all Blackfoot stuff, but it's not just stuff from DGOW 32. You can see the earliest stuff is these big tall guys, V-neck guys holding their weapons up to the side. Then we get these early fight scenes that are pretty sketchy. Then we get these early boat-horn horses. Then the fight scenes become better and better and better and better and better and more realistic. And finally, they come out with this Blackfeet vocabulary where they use just marks to show who did what to whom. Well, there's that chronology with all the extra stuff taken out, with just the stuff from DGOW 32. Couple of little things. That's a coup count tally right there. We didn't have any idea, it's just a scene. It's just a guy on a horse and another guy and a guy and a guy. Well, no, in fact, that's a whole coup count tally if you look at this. And the way they did coup counts, you did a bunch, and then you tallied them up. You did a count of them. And it was very common on buffalo robes. And if you stole 3 guns, you put 3 guns. And if you stole 2 tomahawks, you put 2 tomahawks. Well, this is a tally called an action tally. So here's the guy on his horse, right over here, okay? and he's attacking this guy. So he touches this guy with his coup stick, right? Point one. He scalps this guy, no head. See where his scalp is? This guy's head is this scalp right here. So he scalps the second guy, and finally he takes a horse. So that's a coup count tally across that. That's not just random scenes of warfare actions. All by the same artist. These paired V-neck humans, we saw these early on. These were in the first episode of panel 1, Locus 1. These we didn't get to talk about in any detail, but look at the similarities. They mean the same thing. This is some sort of vision questing or shamanistic thing going on here. Look, this has the same, and this is probably a sex thing going on here. It's not clear from the pictures we have, but we've got other scenes at Writing-on-Stone that show sexual coupling like this. So there's some kind of shamanistic or vision quest thing going on here with these V-neck guys. So, in summary, DGOW 32 had loads to offer us. Thank heaven we got there with drones, and thank heaven we got there before the Milk River cuts underneath the cliff too far, and that whole cliff goes thump and lands in the river. Hopefully, someone, now that we have this kind of record, will be ginned up enough to say, we should go there and construct some scaffolds, because you could do it easy. The river's not very deep right below the panels. Construct some scaffolds and actually be able to go up there and look at those things nose to rock art. It would be fantastic. We refined Plains rock art scenes. We firmed up the prehistoric, protohistoric period chronology from the Northern Plains and rescued dozens of lost images from oblivion. And the key is this site is pristine. There's not one graffiti on it, not one. There's no initials, no names, no nothing. So it's amazing. And I want to say thanks to the folks who helped with this, Bob Dawe specifically, Mark Willis, Dave Kaiser for all his assistance with the photo tracing, Stephen Lysette for the statistical analysis, and a memorial to Jack Brink, who in my mind is always going to be Mr. Writing-on-Stone. So thank you very much.